with regard to large entrenched hardware type ecosystem vendors,
Yep,
where they're confronted with not only the fact that this software supply chain is open source, but the speed with which
yep,
the software evolves. There is no, there is no more waterfall. Let me build this thing soup to nuts in a design and walk
absolutely.
through, and out the other end comes this product that I will maintain, but it won't add any features. Right?
Right.
This thing will stay as it is, other than for maintenance. So
Well,
that model is so different. So what do you see there from a
s- s- that's a really good question, Phil, because it's the timescales that matter. I mean, it's like every software vendor has encountered the discussion with a major automotive or aerospace company of, no, we need that version supported for the next 10, no, 15 years. And that's a requirement from an industry on a vendor that at least, I'm pretty sure SAP, Oracle, Microsoft are going to be around to support it. But it it's the way I've tried to help folks think about this in companies is to be really crisp around the bright line that is upstream projects versus downstream product. And this is the thing that I think the best articulation of it we ever saw was somewhere around 2006, 2007. Uh, Martin Mikos was still CEO at MySQL, and he was giving a talk probably at the Open Source Business Conference. And he made the observation that, they have this huge community, and they also have lots of customers. And his community has time and no money. His customers have money and no time. And he knows which one he has to spend most of his time with as the business. But it was that recognition that within their corporate structure, they had a large community, engaged community of users and developers that they weren't going to buy anything. And but downstream, you have products. Products have releases, products have, licenses and obligations on them and all the rest of it. So you can step into that space where the upstream project can be evolving very quickly. But as soon as you embed that software in a device, in an airplane or in a car, you now have a version that you can track. And it's that version. You might have all kinds of clever things. You look at the modern Tesla now and that the ability to be updating. So tree management is an engineering skill that these companies need to be really good at. But then we even saw that in the software world. There was a Slashdot Ask Me Anything with Jim Whitehurst a few years back, about 5 years ago now. As CEO of Red Hat before it fell into the maw of IBM. And it was a really interesting discussion because he was able to talk about how the next version of RHEL would happen. And yes, Fedora was involved as this upstream distribution project within the Red Hat world, but it also still evolved, pulling a particular kernel that they controlled the build of and layering, I think he said 2,000 patches onto it. Before that was the kernel that became the heart of the next release of RHEL, surrounded by the rest of the Fedora distribution. And it was a wonderful piece of software engineering. And at the time I was working for John Gossman inside of Microsoft, and the two of us were using this as kind of the stumping example as we walked across that this was equivalent to anything that the Windows engineering team was capable of doing over the previous 20 years. This is big tree management inside of a software culture. And so that's the kind of thing that, if you were working for an aerospace company or an automotive manufacturer, it's that recognition that software moves quickly, but there are these anchor points at release points and you need to be good at tree management. And that might not be something they have historically been good at, but either they need to get good at it or they need their suppliers to get good at it, or kind of a combination of that.
Yep.
Um, because that's this crossover point. Upstream, we can be as dynamic as we need to be. In fact, that's the thing. I think there was kind of I had a laugh at one moment. There was a period early in my career where you could find the paper, the 1970s era paper that 60% of the life cycle of software is maintenance. And in the 80s, it was like, oh no, it's 70% of the life cycle of software is maintenance. By the time you get to the 90s, it's like, oh my God, 85% of the life cycle is maintenance. It's like there is no maintenance. That's the aha point. There is no maintenance in software. Software is this continuously evolving dynamic environment that we happen to take snapshots out of and call that, we used to call it software in a box. Now it's, the release today. And all of this tree management becomes so critical in terms of the software engineering practice to deliver and deploy software at scale. And that's I think the real growth in the industry. And that's the thing that got me involved in all of the kind of educational efforts that I've been involved in is a fear that that skill set is being diluted when all of the things have been democratized and anybody can be a net producer of software right now. We're drowning in the bad software of 200 million repos on GitHub. And it's like, okay, I'm pretty sure not all of that is really good software. And the ability to deploy software at scale when software is embedded in the fabric of all of the devices around us, that's a skill set that we need to get better at, not allow it to be diluted behind this wall of everybody publishing software. So, but it's a challenge. Like that idea of no, we build devices. I mean, can you imagine the shock? I'm not even sure how apocryphal the story is, but I've heard it enough times in rooms of automotive engineers. The Tesla, that people went from the idea of dog mode being, well, if I want to leave my dog in the car, why can't I just, turn on dog mode? And if the ambient temperature goes above a particular temperature, the air conditioning comes on. Why wouldn't you do that? And that went from idea to deployed on vehicles overnight in a few months. Now think about that from a traditional automotive hardware manufacturing cycle, where turning on the air conditioning is a set of buttons on your dashboard. Like, how do you think about that as a software change, a trivial software change, as an app that you would download to your car? And that whole pipeline, what does that mean when, the temperature sensor versus the button? Is dog mode a button on my dashboard? Like, how many model years do I have to wait for the dashboard design, physical design of the dashboard to change for there to be a dog mode setting on the, air conditioning panel? It's a different way of thinking about the problem with the speed that you can move its software. And so you, instead of specifying an architecture up front, you have to get comfortable with the idea of exploring the architecture in software, failing fast. Good engineers learn to fail quickly. And, that's always been kind of an engineering premise is, what'd you learn in the failure? The whole iron ring ceremony and the iron coming from the bridge that fell down. It's like, this is what engineers do, is deploy things at scale with a societal impact. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about an operating system on that plane or a bridge that spans a particularly busy span of water. That's what engineers do. And so you step into that space and it's okay, so a really interesting example right now out of the Eclipse software defined vehicle working group. General Motors is showing up as a member. They aren't a strategic member. the group that joined is actually an engineering team that's responsible for shipping vehicles. So this isn't somebody stepping in from, the lab organization or the CTO's office or something like that. There was basically an engineering team doing a project called U Protocol, which is a device communications software. And they built the software, it's shipping in vehicles. They've now open source licensed the project. They brought the project into Eclipse as an Eclipse project. And now they're working in the software defined vehicle working group with their partners to ensure that the very tiny ecosystem around this project starts to grow. And, contrast that with the idea of how an automotive OEM might have done things historically 10 years ago. And it's that idea of they're aggressively exploring this idea of how do we evolve forward quickly around a software project with our partners, kind of bringing them along so that our partners are seeing revenue and a reason to be in the room with us while we're amortizing the costs and gaining the kind of new ideas to support this software that we believe is important. The fact that it's already shipped in a vehicle, that's that upstream project versus downstream product bright line. Like they know that there's a version of the software, regardless of what the upstream project looks like, that must be supported for the next 10 or 15 years, whatever the automotive industry does.
Right.
So it's a way of thinking about it that's just different. And it's getting comfortable with that difference if you want to take advantage of the benefits that come from that flexibility that software might give you.
Yeah. It's just such a cultural change though, right? I mean,
Right.
and
And there's no telling people, you're wrong, because they aren't. It's and you can be unfriendly about it. Well, those buggy whip, manufacturers, that were they ever surprised when cars came along? Well, yeah, but I'm sure that the economics was a little more complex than that.